All right, you're welcome to this session. My name is Barbara Wochalia, and I'm going to be taking you through production and operations management, which has a code of BA 209. It is also operations management for those of you that are doing supply chain and management, PM 201. All right, so let's look at the introduction to production and operations management. And this is our chapter overview. We shall be looking at the definition of operations management, the differences between manufacturing and service organization. We shall be looking at operations management decisions, historical development of operations management, and then we shall look at today's operation management environment, and then the operations management in practice. So when we talk about operations management, we are basically, it's a function that involves a number of managerial activities like planning, organizing, controlling, and coordinating, aimed at producing the goods and services of any company or organization. So these activities of planning, organizing, coordinating, and controlling, they are basically managerial functions. So operations management is a managerial function that is aimed at using people, material, money, machines, and other resources to come up with the goods and services of any organization. And it's a function for all organizations, whether big or small. So operations management works along with other functions or other departments of businesses. For example, we see that if, for any business, it should have a marketing department, right? So marketing works along with operations management, and then also we see a finance. For example, we can have the marketing department, the operations department, and the finance department. But all of them work together. All of them work together so that an organization can have goods and services. All right. So let's look at the transformation process. With the transformation process, we mean converting inputs into output, converting inputs into the final output or the final product. The input could be, for example, the raw materials used in the production process to produce the final output. We're together. So the inputs in this perspective, in the transformation process, the inputs can be the human resources or the workers, the people hired, then the facilities and processes, the processes of production, right? And then the technologies applied, and then the materials that could, for example, be the raw materials. All these are used as inputs, and during the transformation process, at the end of the day, we have the final output, which are the final goods and services. So with the inputs, inputs pass through the transformation process to get the final product. And here we have the information. The final product, of course, goes to the final user, who is the customer. And the feedback from customer is very important, and also performance information from customers is how the organization is performing. For example, the quality, how the customers will communicate whether the product is of good quality or not. So all this feedback from the customer is useful to the farm or to the business to be able to adjust its transformation process, to be able to adjust the inputs are used in the production process. So we have what we call value added. From the time an input is converted into the final output, of course, at the end of the day, we shall realize that there will be value added. So that value added will be in terms of that difference. For example, if it was milk as the input or a raw material, and during the transformation process or the production process, it is converted into yogurt. It is converted into yogurt or ice cream. Then the value added will be the difference. For example, the raw milk initially, if it was 1,000, and the final product of ice cream is, for example, 5,000, we shall just get the difference, 5,000 minus 1,000, to get our value added as 4,000. Then when we talk about efficiency, these are terms that you're going to be using as vocabulary here in this subject. So when we talk about efficiency, we mean being able to perform activities well at the lowest possible cost. That's what we mean by efficiency. So let's look at the scope of production and operations management. And with the scope of production and operations management, basically, we are looking at the topics or the activities or the functions that are involved in or that comprise production and operations management. So we have what we call operations, we have what we call forecasting. All these, we shall look at them as separate topics, but these are basically the functions of operation management or the key activities that are involved in operations management. So any business has to make decisions, and while making decisions, at the end of the day, these decisions are made in line with the scope of production and operations management, and of course, the activities. So businesses will have to do forecasting, and forecasting, for example, if we take an example of the travel industry, whereby, for example, we are looking at the travel industry, we are looking at airplanes, yeah? They are providing travel services. If we talk about forecasting in the travel industry for airplanes, basically air transport, forecasting would be in terms of forecasting the weather forecasting. For example, if you forecast that the weather is not good, maybe it is foggy, maybe there is a lot of mist, or there is a lot of rain, or there are storms, deadly storms, then you might not organize those flights to take over. I mean, to those flights, you might not schedule those flights because this will be risky. So basically, it can be in form of weather forecasting. It can be in form of forecasting, for example, forecasting the number of seats that should be demanded. You forecast the number of people that are going to buy air tickets for flights. Are we together? So that is what we call forecasting. And then still under product, we are looking at the scope of production and operations management, and these are basically functions or what is entailed in production and operation management, or the topics that we shall be looking at during the course of studying this particular subject. Then capacity planning. Now, still, if we are looking at the travel or the air travel industry, we are looking at airlines. For capacity planning, it would be how are you organizing how many airplanes, for example, will be able to handle the number of clients that you are working on. So the capacity, the number of clients, whether too few or too many, they'll be able to help you to plan. They'll be able to help you to plan maybe how many airplanes should be provided to meet these flights. Then we have another function, which is the facilities and layout. So with the facilities, basically we are looking at the physical, we are looking at the physical appearance of the physical appearance, the structures. For example, the premises, and we are looking at these premises, how are they going to be arranged? For example, if it is maybe a restaurant, for facilities and layout, we are asking ourselves that how is it going to be laid out? Will it have a kitchen? Will it have a place where clients are sitting? Will it have a place where you're selling these maybe the foods? Are we together? Are we together? The counter, should it have a counter? So that is all involved in facilities and the layout. And then another function in production and operations management is scheduling. Scheduling, a schedule. A schedule is, for example, timetabling, isn't it? So if we are looking at the travel industry, we are looking at planes. Scheduling is basically when the client comes in and wants to take a flight, then they will schedule. Of course, the client will provide information on when they want to travel, and of course, this airline company will schedule a flight when that flight will be. So that is what is involved in scheduling. And then we have another function of production and operations management, which is managing inventories. Managing inventory. Now, the inventory, now the inventory here, we look at raw materials, we look at the final product. Are we together? For example, if we are taking an example of the air travel industry, airplanes, for example, here that are providing flight services, then if we are talking about managing inventories, here, for example, these air company, the travel companies will be providing, for example, for the travelers who are taking the flight, managing inventory will involve managing the foods and beverages. You know, when these people are taking flights in the airplanes, they are given food. They are given food, they are given beverages, drinks. So managing inventory is deciding how much, for example, of the food you'll be able to provide, you'll be able to prepare for these travelers in the airplane. You look at areas to do, aspects to do with the first aid equipment. Of course, as they are traveling, anything can happen and they need first aid. And then also you can look at the in-flight magazines. As these travelers are taking the flight in the airplane, they can read magazines. You look at how many magazines, depending on the number of travelers that have ordered for that flight, that you'll be able to provide pillows, blankets, life preservers, and so on. Then we have another function, and remember, we are looking at the scope of production and operations management. We are looking at the scope of production and operations management, and we are looking at the various functions or activities that are involved in production and operations management. It also has a function of assuring quality. All these, we shall be looking at them as separate topics in details. Assuring quality, here you're looking at, for example, if we are looking at the flight or the travel industry, the air travel industry. With the quality assurance here, we are looking at aspects. We are looking at aspects of customer care, of these customer care as they are ordering for these air tickets. How do you respond to their calls, right? How do you respond to electronic and telephone reservations as they are reserving for these flights? How are you responding them? How fast are you responding to them? So all that is in assuring quality. Then we have another function of operations, of production and operations management, is motivating and training. So motivating and training is also important, motivating these workers for you to be able to come up with the final product, of course, which is quality, which is to have efficiency. So you have to motivate and train these workers. And then another area of operations management is locating facilities. Of course, these are decisions that a business will have to make. These are decisions that a business will have to make while you are looking at all right, let's continue. So we were looking at locating facilities. All these are involved in operations management, and locating facilities is very important. Where you locate your business will determine the number of clients, right? For example, you may decide to allocate your facility in a major hub where you see that there are many customers. So also that one is important. Then we have another function, which is purchasing. Purchasing is also part of operations management, and here it involves aspects. Of purchasing raw material from your suppliers, purchasing the required equipment in the production process, right? And then also, as you're purchasing these raw materials, for example, from your suppliers, you also have to ensure that you're purchasing quality raw materials, right? You're purchasing quality raw materials that will meet your customers' demand. Then we have distribution. Distribution involves shipping these goods or transporting these goods goods to the final consumer, transporting them to warehouses. Warehouses are like stores where these goods are put, for example, in a particular location, and from there they are supplied to the final users or the customers. And then distribution also involves transporting these goods to the retail outlets, retail shops, for example, or even to, directly to the final customers. Then we have another element or another function of operations management, which is maintenance. So maintenance has a number of aspects. It has a number of aspects. It can involve repairing of equipment in the case they are worn out, in the case they have got a technical fault. It may involve renovating your buildings and grounds. It may involve having for you to reinstall maybe air conditioning if you need so, or heating. It may involve removing toxic wastes, of course, depending on the type of business that you are managing. So let's look at the difference between manufacturing and service organizations. Manufacturing and service organization. So with the manufacturing, we are going to realize that with the manufacturing, it involves production of physical goods, right? Manufacturing, when we talk about manufacturing, we are looking at production of physical or tangible goods. Tangible means something that you can touch. Whereas with the service organization, the goods are not physical, they are not tangible. For example, a service, for example, education is a service, isn't it? Banking is a service. When you get your treatment from hospitals, you are getting a service. You are not getting a product, but you are getting a service. When someone goes to a theater to be operated, they are getting a service, not a product. So that is the difference between that is one of the differences between manufacturing and service organization. And then another difference is that with manufacturing, there is low contact. There is low contact between the producers and the final users and the customer, right? Because with manufacturing, after manufacturing, these goods, like we've seen, they are distributed to the retailers, yeah, up to when they reach the final user. But with the service organization, there is a close contact, there is close contact, there is high contact between the producers or the sellers and the customers, right? And then also we see that with the manufacturing, it is highly capital intensive. Capital intensive means that they use machines. With manufacturing, they use machines, they are capital intensive, whereas with the service organization, it is labor intensive. With the labor intensive, we mean that human beings are used to do the work, right? And then with the manufacturing, we realize that products can be inventoried. We have inventory with manufacturing, whereas with the service organization, we don't have inventory. We don't have inventory. Inventory here, we are looking at the stock, we are looking at the raw materials. Those ones are not there in the service organization. And then in terms of response time, for manufacturing organization, they have low response time. They have long response time. In other words, with long response time, we look at, for example, when the client comes in, maybe when the client makes an order, and then the time between when the client makes an order and when the client is attended to, that is longer under manufacturing organization, whereas with service organization, they have a shorter response rate. Why? Because there is a close contact between the sellers and the customers. So let's look at operations management decision. Operations management decisions. These decisions are either long-term or short-term. They are either long-term or short-term. They are either long-term or short-term. So with the long-term decisions that show the direction, the specific direction of an organization, they are called strategic decisions. They are called strategic decisions. And the short-term decisions, they are called tactical decisions. Tactical decisions, as we are going to later on see. So let us look at the operation management decisions. Remember, we are just from looking at the scope of operations management. The scope of operations management, And we have been looking at basically what we are going to cover in this particular subject, operations management. And basically the scope involves the functions or the activities involved in operations management. So let's look at an example here. An example here of decisions, of business decisions. But remember that these business decisions are taken in line with they are taken in line with the functions of operations management. So let's look at a case study or an example of a business here that is called Gourmet Wafers. Gourmet Wafers. And these ones, it's a cookie product. They make cookies. They make cookies. So let's look at this example. Maybe it will be able to give us a wider scope and help us to understand what we mean, what we basically mean by the scope of operations management, or what we mean by the decision making in operations management, or the functions of operations management. So if we are looking at, for example, if we are looking at operations strategy for this particular example here, a cookie producing company, the operations strategy will be, it will be in terms of a question. So this company will ask itself, how does it make itself, how does it make its business different or unique from its rivals or from other competing farms that are also producing similar items, that are also producing cookies. So it can decide, its operation strategy can be that it aims at producing freshly baked cookies, freshly baked homemade cookies. So that can be something, the operation strategy that makes it unique, of course, and different from its competitors. And then we have product design. All these are in the scope of operations management. Remember, they are also decision making. They are involved in decision. This is decision making in operations management. So we have a business has to make decisions for product design. And when it's making a decision on product design, for this particular example, this cookie making company, the question for product design would be, what are the unique features of the product? What are the unique features of these cookies that they are making? And the answer would be that the unique feature of these cookies is that these cookies are loaded with extra large crunchy pecans, and they are fresh and moist. So that is the unique feature of these cookies that makes it different from other competing farms that are making cookies. So that would be under product design. Another decision would be process selection. Process, of course, has to do with the means of production, methods of production. So with process selection, here this farm or this business will ask itself a question: what are the unique features of the process that give the product its unique characteristics? So what is used during the process of making these cookies? And the question here is that they have a special convention oven. They have a special convention oven that is used to make the cookies in order to keep them fresh and moist. So that is the process selection. They are using a convention oven to make these cookies fresh and moist, right? And then another decision will be, operations management decision would be on supply chain management. Remember, all these, we are going to look at them as separate topics. So with the supply chain management decision, this cookie making company will ask itself a question: what sources of supply should we use to ensure a regular and timely receipt of extra materials that we need? How do we manage these sources of supply? So practically, just to help us understand, supply chain management means the coordination between the external, the coordination between external activities and internal activities, as well as the customers. So with the supply chain here, this cookie making company or business will be looking at which people are supplying them with the raw materials used in the making of cookies, which people are supplying them with the flour. If they're using flour, for example, who is supplying them with the flour, with the flour that they are using in the production process? Those are the suppliers. And then also at the end of the day, who are their customers? Who are their customers, and how are they delivering? How are they delivering their cookies to the final customers? So those will have to be our decisions. For example, here the answer would be that this business is saying that the key ingredients are pecans and syrup, which will be purchased from only one supplier located in South Carolina. This is in the US. This is a company that makes cookies in the US. So we are using it as a case study. So of course they will have to make decisions on, they'll have to make decisions on the suppliers who supply them with the key ingredients in the cookie making process. Then another decision, another operations management decision will be in terms of quality management. Will be in terms of quality management, and this cookie making farm or business will be asking itself how they are going to ensure and measure quality and also identify quality problems. So here for them, what they have decided is to do a quality check at each stage of cookie production. They are making a quality check to make sure that these cookies come out very well and perfectly, and these cookies come out thorough to ensure quality. So they are taking quality checks at each stage of cookie production. I hope we are getting the logic. If there is anything unclear, please feel free to ask, because we are here to learn. And then another operations management decision will be forecasting. And the forecasting basically here, since it is a cookie making business, they are going to forecast the demand of the product. They are forecasting how many sales can be made in a day, how many sales will be made in a week, in a month, and in a year. So they are forecasting demand. Are we getting that? And then another decision, another operations management decision will be in terms of location analysis. Remember, we have looked at these when we've been looking at the scope of operations management, and we've been looking at the functions. The scope is basically the functions, or what operations management entails, what is entailed in operations management. And of course, what is entailed in operations management are the decisions. We shall make decisions depending on the scope of what is entailed, or the functions of operations management. So another operations management decision will be in terms of location analysis. And here, this cookie business is asking themselves, where will the facility be located? So of course, they will have to make key decisions on where to locate this cookie business. And at the end of the day, they are deciding to locate this cookie business in a shopping mall, because that's where they think they will get the market. Then another decision, operations management decision, will be in form of capacity planning. Capacity planning. And capacity planning has to do with how large will the facility be? How large will this premise be? So of course, the premise will be, how large this premise will be will depend on the number of clients they are expecting altogether and the number of cookies they are expecting to make. And then another operations management decision is facility layout. Facility layout. So for this particular example or case study of a cookie making business, they would ask themselves that how will this facility be set up? How will it be organized? So this cookie business, how will it be organized? So you find that maybe they'll have, will they have a kitchen? Will they have ovens? Will the ovens be located there? And will they have a place where customers are sitting? So at the end of the day, they decide that they make decisions that they will have a kitchen, yeah, in the facility. They will have a place where customers sit, and maybe they will have a place where a counter is. They have a counter for selling these cookies. That is about facility layout. So we are taking this example basically to help us understand, right? And then another operations management decision will be in terms of job design and work environment. Job design and work environment. So job design will have to do with asking this business asking itself what jobs will be needed in the facility and who will do these tasks, who will do these tasks. So of course, at the end of the day, here they will need people. For example, here they decide that they need 2 people in the kitchen during busy periods. And here they say, and they decide that during slow periods, they only need 1 person in the kitchen. And also they've taken a decision that of course, these workers will have duties to do. Maybe they'll have to bake the cookies. Maybe they'll have to pack these cookies, right? And then they also need, they decide that they also need 1 person taking the orders for these cookies at all times. And then another operations management decision is inventory management. Inventory management. So this cookie business is deciding inventory management. Remember, we've seen that it involves deciding how much of the raw materials will you have and how much of the stock will you keep in stock. So inventory management here, they finally decide that a different policy is developed for common ingredients such as flour and sugar. So here, for example, they decided to order from their suppliers the flour and the sugar that, for example, they order after 2 weeks. So that is all about inventory management. And then lastly, we have scheduling. And like we've already seen that scheduling involves making, for example, a rota, making a rota, which employee will do what and when. For example, here with the scheduling, these workers might be arranged in shifts, where some people are working in shifts. You find some are working during day, some are working during night. That is all about making decisions on scheduling. So I hope we have got those operations management decisions. If there is anything unclear, feel free to ask. Let's look at the relationship between strategic and the tactical decisions. So strategic decisions are long-term decisions, like we've already seen, that show that the direction of the entire organization. And when they are short-term decisions, they are called tactical decisions. So tactical decisions are short-term decisions, and the strategic decisions are long-term decisions of the business or the organization. So these decisions that we've seen, for example, here, most of them are long-term decisions, apart from scheduling, yeah? Apart from scheduling and inventory management. So the short-term, the long-term decision can be decisions, for example, on determining the location of the business, facility layout, forecasting, yeah? All those are long-term decisions, which are strategic decisions. But tactical decisions or short-term decisions, they are decisions that are, for example, made for day-to-day issues of the business, such as scheduling, scheduling of which worker will do what task. Those are short-term decisions or tactical decisions. So let's look at the historical development of operations management. The historical development of operations management. How did operations management come into? How did it start? Right? How it started. We want to look at how it started, and up to now, how has operations management been? So briefly, maybe let's look at how this operations management I hope we can see that visibly. Is that clear? Anyway, I don't know, but let's continue. And maybe let me just explain how operations management evolved. So let's look at the historical evolution of operations management. Now, it all began with the Industrial Revolution. With the industrial operations management, it all began with the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s. That was in the 1770s. And the Industrial Revolution began in England before it spread to the rest of Europe and then to the United States in the 19th century. So briefly, the Industrial Revolution, it involved the introduction of machines. It involved the introduction of the use of machines. And these machines, basically, they were using, they introduced, initially we see that before the Industrial Revolution, people were using rudimentary tools. People were using either hands, they were using what we call craft. They were using craft production, where they were using hands to make goods, to make these goods or products. Are we together? So before, they were using what we call craft production. They were using hands to make goods and services before the Industrial Revolution came in. And with the Industrial Revolution, basically, it involved the introduction of machines like the steam engine, which was used as a source of power, The steam engine was the generating power in the production process. So with the Industrial Revolution, it saw the introduction of new machines that were made out of iron, contrary to the products that were simply made of wooden, that was simply made using simple wooden machines. So the machines, these new machines these new machines that were made of iron replaced the previous machines that were wooden. Are we together? So we see that before the Industrial Revolution, It was basically craft. We had the craft production, where we see that with the craft production, craft production, people were using hands. They were using simple tools to make the goods, and it was costly. It was costly and time consuming, right? It was slow. It was costly because they were using hands. They didn't have machines to make these products. So after that, that's when we saw the Industrial Revolution coming in the 1700s, and it began in Britain, spread to the rest of Europe, and then to the rest of Europe, and then to the United States, and it saw the introduction of machines like the steam engine. So after the industrial, remember we began with craft production, then we went to Industrial Revolution. And then after the Industrial Revolution, we had another era of scientific management. We had another era of scientific management that was spearheaded by by a personality by the names of Frederick Winslow Taylor. Frederick Winslow Taylor. And the scientific management basically believed, with the scientific management, it believed in studying job designs, analyzing them, and looking for ways of improving these job designs or work methods, and also providing economic incentives, So that was all that comprised of scientific management that was spearheaded by Frederick Winslow Taylor, or F.W. Taylor. So he believed in training workers. He believed in motivating workers. He believed in training these workers. He believed in economic incentives, and the scientific management also believed in improving work designs. So Frederick Taylor studied the different work methods, and also looked at work methods, and also to find ways of improving these work methods. All right. So with the scientific management, we had a number of other people, a number of other pioneers in the scientific management era, right? It was Frederick Winslow Taylor that propounded it. And remember, we have seen that it involved a study of work design. He studied the work designs and how to make these work designs better, and also to bring about economic incentives and to improve these work designs. So he was joined by other pioneers, and we had Frank Gilbreth. So Frank Gilbreth was an industrial engineer, and is also known as the father of motion study. He was also a personality under this scientific management era. We had also another personality under scientific management by the names of Henry Gantt. If you've heard about the Gantt chart, Henry Gantt actually recognized the use of non-monetary rewards to motivate workers. He talked about the use of non-monetary incentives to motivate workers, and he also introduced what we call the Gantt chart. He also introduced the Gantt chart, which is a system of scheduling. It is a system of, I should say, timetabling. A Gantt chart. It is a format of timetabling that is widely used around the world, which is called the Gantt chart. So all these were pioneers under the scientific management era. And then we had another pioneer under the scientific management era by the names of Harrington Emerson. And for him, he talked about, he encouraged experts to improve, he encouraged the use of experts to improve organization efficiency. So according to Harrington Emerson, for him, efficiency would be attained by organization as long as they used experts, as long as they used experts in their production process. And then we also had another pioneer under the scientific management era by the names of Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Henry Ford was an industrialist. He was an industrialist, and he also employed the scientific management techniques. And one of the outstanding things that Henry Ford did is that he introduced an automobile, or what I would call a car, right? What I would call a car or a vehicle. He introduced an automobile because he was an industrialist. He introduced an automobile called the Ford's Model T, the Ford's Model T, which actually sold a lot, and in an effort to improve efficiency of operations, he adopted also scientific management principles in his factory. Remember that he was an industrialist and he had his factory, and he introduced that automobile or vehicle called the Ford's Model T, which sold a lot, right? And then also he introduced what we call the assembly line. We are going to see what is meant by the assembly line. Also, another important thing that Henry Ford did is that he introduced mass production, what we call a mass production, to the automotive industry. Automotive here, we are looking at vehicles, yeah? We are looking at vehicles, isn't it? So he introduced mass production, and when we talk about mass production, basically we are looking at production of standardized products, in large volumes, or standardized, we mean uniform products. Large uniform products, but while using low-skilled workers or semi-skilled workers. That's what we mean by mass production, although we may be using costly equipment. So with the mass production this Henry Ford introduced, we realize that mass production means production of large volume of goods and services, standardized or uniform goods and services using low-skilled or semi-skilled labor, although we may use costly equipment. So Henry Ford also introduced what we call the division of labor, which was also talked about by Adam Smith in his book that he wrote in 1776 entitled The Wealth of Nations. So Henry Ford introduced the division of labor. And the division of labor, basically, we see that if we have the production process, different parts of that production process will be subdivided. Workers will be given different tasks. Everyone will do a different task to produce the final product. The tasks are divided into different tasks and assigned to different workers. Are we together? So that's what we call division of labor. So Henry Ford also introduced the division of labor. So we see that this industrialist under the scientific management era, he does a lot. So we see that he was an industrialist who had his factory, and in his factory he introduced a new automobile, the Ford's Model T. We see that he introduced mass production, the use of assembly line. We see that he introduced the division of labor, and he also applied the scientific management principles as they were spearheaded by the father of scientific management, Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? So, however, this scientific management era, we see that both Taylor and Ford, they despised the workers because they assumed that workers should be as robots, should perform as robots. They were not considering the welfare of workers, but rather they looked at these workers to work as robots, which was criticized. And because of that, this gave rise to the evolution of another era that was called the human relations movement. The human relations movement. So this is an assembly line in Henry Ford's Motor Company. You see that this man he introduced that automobile in his company, right? And we see that he introduced the assembly line. When we look at that picture over there, we are looking at the assembly line, where, for example, an automobile or a car is being made. It will have different sections, and each section has each worker, and each worker is working on a different part of the car. Are we together? And because of that here, of course, the assembly line, of course, explains the division of labor, where we see that the tasks are divided into different tasks and assigned to separate workers. So practically, that is what we call the assembly line for the automobile, and the division of labor that was introduced by Henry Ford. So because we have seen that with the scientific management era, this Henry Ford and Frederick Winslow Taylor, they did not take regard for the workers, for the welfare of the workers. Rather, they wanted these workers to work as robots. And because of that, this gave rise to the evolution of another era that was called the human relations movement. The human relations movement. And in the human relations movement, we see that a number of pioneers of this human relations movement, they basically talked about workers, the welfare of workers. They talked about motivation of workers, right? So we see that under this human relations movement, we see Lillian Gilbreth. Lillian Gilbreth was a wife. She was a wife to Frank Gilbreth. Remember, we've seen that Frank Gilbreth was a pioneer, one of the pioneers in the scientific management era, who introduced motion study, who is also called the father of motion study. And this was his wife, Lillian Gilbreth. They are also called the Gilbreths. So this Lillian Gilbreth was a wife. She was a psychologist and a wife to Frank Gilbreth. And they worked together as wife and husband, right? But since Lillian Gilbreth was a psychologist, she did her studies on human factor. She did her studies that dealt on human factor. And also we see that in her studies in the 1920s, they basically focused on workers' fatigue, right? And in the following decades, there was much emphasis on motivation. So the the human relations movement was basically, movement era was basically about motivating workers. It basically had pioneers here who talked about motivating workers. We also, under the human relations movement era, we also had another pioneer by the names of Elton Mayo, who talked in the 1930s. He conducted what we call the Hawthorne experiment, and it was called the Hawthorne experiment because of the location where it was carried. So he conducted the studies at a place called Hawthorne Division of Western Electric. And these studies, basically, in these studies, he revealed, or he discovered, he found out that the productivity of workers improved as long as they were motivated. So according to Elton Mayo, in his Hawthorne studies, in his Hawthorne experiment at a place known as Hawthorne Division of Western Electric, in his studies, he realized, or he found out, that the productivity of workers increased as long as these workers were motivated. Still under the human relations movement, we had another pioneer here in the 1940s by the name of Abraham Maslow. I hope some of you have come across the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow, he talked about motivating theories. He developed motivation theories. And if you read more about Abraham Maslow, you realize that he developed what we call a hierarchy of needs, where he characterized in form of a triangle, where he categorized the needs according to the basic needs from the lower part of the hierarchy, and the basic needs were at the lower part of the hierarchy, and they went on up to the least needs, up to the higher part of the hierarchy. Are we together? And then we also had Frederick. All these are pioneers under the human relations era, which is talking about motivation of workers. We also had Frederick Herzberg, who refined the motivation theories that were developed by Abraham Maslow, and he refined them in the 1950s. We had another pioneer under the human relations movement by the name of Douglas McGregor. I think you've come across these some of these personalities in principles of management. If you've studied principles of management or organization theory and management. So still under the human relations era, we had Douglas McGregor, and he introduced the theory X and theory Y in the 1960s. And in short, this theory talked about two types of workers, where he said that in his theory X, he says that in the theory X, workers do not want to work, and for that, and to make them work, they should be controlled. They should be that workers do not want to work. They are lazy, and they should be controlled. They should be rewarded, and they should be punished in order to come up with to make them do the good work. That was about the theory X. Have we got that? So Douglas McGregor talks about the theory X, and in the theory X, he explains that in the theory X, he talks about workers, and he says that workers are lazy, they don't want to work, and in order to make them do the good work, they should be punished, they should be rewarded, they should be coerced, or they should be controlled. That is the theory X. And in the theory Y, he talks about the opposite. On contrary, he says that in theory Y, workers want to work, and they use their physical and mental aspects to become committed to work. Are we together? All right. So we also have in the 1970s, we had William Ouch, who also added the theory Z, and in the theory Z, it was basically combined the Japanese approach, right? The Japanese approach, and it had features of lifetime employment, and it also had features of employee problem solving. So for the theory Z, it basically aimed at, it talked about solving the problems of employees. Are we together? And also, it also featured on building consensus between workers. Yeah, building consensus between workers, getting consensus is getting a majority vote, making decision, but you're getting consensus, a majority vote from the workers, right? So that was all about the human relations movement that in summary was talking about motivating workers. Then from there we had another era of decision models and management sciences. So with the decision models, to be precise, it involved the use of mathematical models. Yeah, it involved the use of quantitative techniques, the use of mathematical models, and these mathematical models, let's look at the key personalities under the decision models and management science era. So we had several quantitative techniques. We had F.W. Harris, who developed the first model in 1915, and it was called the inventory order size model. And then in the 1930s, we had three co-workers. By the name of Dodge, Roming, and Schwartz, who developed statistical procedures for sampling and quality control. So these models basically involved managing inventory. They involved managing quality control. And then we had also another personality under decision models and management science by the name of L.H.C. Tippett. And for him, he conducted studies that gave rise to the groundwork for the statistical sampling theory. So the decision models and the management science were basically mathematical, statistical, or quantitative models that aimed at controlling quality, controlling inventory. Are we together? And sampling, right? And then we had the influence. Remember, we are looking at the evolution of operations management. So we had also the influence of the Japanese manufacturers. These Japanese manufacturers, they focused a lot. They focused a lot on quality, on improving quality and the productivity. And because of that, they influenced the Americans as well. And we had the Americans, we had these Americans by the names of W.E. Edward Deming and Joseph Juran, who basically talked about quality. They talked about quality control. We shall later on look at the total quality management, and we see that W. Edward Deming actually introduced what we call the 14-point program of total quality management. the 14-point program of quality management. So the influence of the Japanese manufacturers also influenced the Americans as well, that also saw the use of quality, the approaches of quality management, continual improvement, working as teams, worker teams and empowerment. And of course, all these are in total quality management. All these are involved in what? In total quality management. When we talk about quality, continual improvement, worker teams and empowerment, customer satisfaction, all these are quality management, which was basically called the Japanese quality revolution. The Japanese quality revolution. And this gave rise to interest in lean production. We shall look at what lean production means. So let's look at, so briefly, we have looked at the evolution, just to give you a recap, because this might sound a little new and complicated to you, but I'll be giving you a recap. So practically, we have looked at, or in summary, we have looked at the evolution of operations management. And we saw that it all began with the crafty production, where people were using hands and the simple tools to make goods, to make products, but it was costly and time consuming and slow. And so that saw the rising of the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s, which basically started in Britain and then spread to the rest of Europe and then to the United States. And the Industrial Revolution, it involved introduction of machines, like the use of the steam engines. It involved using of the steam engines as a source of power, and then also the use of iron ore to make machines that replaced the use of wooden machines in the crafty production previously. And then from there, we saw scientific management era, where we've seen a number of personalities. Of course, we've seen that Frederick Winslow Taylor was spearheaded the scientific management era. And we've seen that with the scientific management, basically, it involved the work designs, studying work designs, analyzing them, and seeing ways of improving these work designs, and of course, involving economic incentives. But we saw that the scientific management, of course, we've seen a number of pioneers there. We saw Henry Ford, right? Henry Ford, and we saw that Henry Ford introduced a number of things. He introduced that Henry Ford automobile, T-Mobile, introduced the assembly lines, introduced the division of labor. But then we see that under the scientific management, we see that it did not provide for workers' welfare. So because of that, we saw the rising of the human relations era, which basically talked about motivating of workers. And we have seen a number of pioneers there in the human relations era. We've seen, for example, Abraham Maslow. We have seen Lillian Gilbreth. We have seen Douglas MacGregor. We have seen Elton Mayo. All those were pioneers of the human relations movement. And then we saw the decision sciences, we've looked at the management science, the decision models and management science, where we've seen that it was basically the use of statistical techniques or quantitative or mathematical techniques to control inventory and to control quality. And then also we see that the Japanese, in their manufacturing, they came up with quality control, which is the quality management and the use of lean operations, right? So now that was about evolution of operations management. Let us look at operations management today. Operations management today. How is operations management like today? So today, basically, we are using what we call electronic business or e-business, electronic business. And there is a difference between electronic business and electronic commerce. Who can tell us the difference between electronic business and electronic commerce? Is there a difference? Wow, I see this is a big class. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have a class of 7 students. These are many students. So can I take a choice here? So Winnie, tell us, is there a difference between electronic business and electronic commerce? Winnie. All right, it seems people are quiet there. Let us continue without wasting time. So electronic commerce involves it involves using the internet, yeah? It involves using internet, but here the interaction is between the customer and the organization. Electronic commerce. Are we together? Electronic commerce, we are using the internet, right, to do business, but the interaction is between the customer and the organization. That is electronic commerce. But electronic business, here it is interaction between businesses. It is interaction between, for example, two businesses, where it can be that we are doing e-procurement. E-procurement, one business is buying from another business, but online using the internet. So that will be electronic business between the two businesses, electronic business. But electronic commerce, it is we are doing online, we are selling online, but it is the interaction is between the consumer and the organization. So I hope we are getting the difference between electronic business and electronic commerce. So today, operations management, we are using e-business, e-commerce, and we are primarily using 3 types of technology, and these are product and service technology, process technology, and information technology. So product and service technology basically involves coming up with a new product, developing a new product. Then process technology has to do with coming up with the new methods of producing that product. It could be in terms of new machines. It could be in terms of using machines to produce that product. And then information technology, we are basically here using computers. We are using computers, we are using the internet to do this kind of business, to get information, to store information, and to send this information. That is, those are the types of technology: product and service technology, process technology, and information technology. And because of competitive pressures, businesses are now, because of competitive pressures and the changing economic conditions, businesses are now putting emphasis on the following. They are putting emphasis on operations strategy. They are putting emphasis on operation strategy. They are putting emphasis on working with fewer resources. They are putting emphasis on revenue management, and they're also putting emphasis on process analysis and improvement and quality improvement. And they are putting emphasis on agility, and they are also putting emphasis on lean production. Now, let me explain these let me explain let me explain these aspects, and then we shall call it a session. Now, with operations strategy, like we've seen that here we are asking the company or the business is asking itself that how unique will you make your service, or how unique will you make your service? How will you make your service unique to be unique from other competitors? So that is all about operations strategy. And working with fewer resources here, it means that workers today are focusing on, for example, resources could be in terms of human resource. Yeah, it could be here working with fewer resources. It may involve companies downsizing, laying off some workers to minimize costs. Yeah, that is working with fewer resources, working with fewer workers, for example. And then revenue management here, it has to do with the companies working on the demand of the product or service, while altering the prices, to increase revenue, So it could be that this company maybe lowers the prices slightly to increase demand, but with the overall objective of increasing the sales or increasing the revenue. And then the process analysis and improvement and quality improvement, we see that here process analysis and improvement, it can involve reducing on the steps or the procedures in the production process, such that it takes less time to produce the good, and of course less costs. And then also quality improvement. Quality here can be in different forms. For example, it can be quality in terms of how you respond to the clients. How is your response time to the clients, and how do you respond to their complaints? All that is in quality improvement. And then agility is flexibility. How flexible is the company in terms of how can the company adjust or be flexible in terms of changes in the demand, changes in the demand for the product. And also a lean production here. By lean production, we mean eliminating waste, eliminating variability, reducing costs, but then maximizing output. So unless there is any question, I want us to stop here for today.